What if you knew that this major winter storm that's affecting the southern plains through the southeast and into the east coast, and what's about to happen next after this storm, several weeks ago, or even over a month ago? I'm meteorologist Justin Storm. I've been forecasting storms like this mainly for the northern plains, but we're taking a larger zoomed out look at this and bringing more information about forecasting these major storms months in advance using a new weather forecasting methodology referred to as the LRC, or the Lezak Recurring Cycle. And I had a video up just the other day. I have a handful of these up from last cycle, and I'm just starting to get back into it with this cycle here. But if you haven't had a chance to watch this video, I was forecasting or explaining how the winter storm that affected Kansas, I think it was the fourth largest snowstorm they've had, in some spots 2 inches of freezing rain across the entire country. Well, it was mostly less than an inch for the entire country, but there were spots within there that saw over an inch. And how this was forecasted over a month ago. What is the LRC? The Lezak Recurring Cycle is a cycling methodology to weather forecasting. To sum it up very, very simplistically, a unique weather pattern at the 500 millibar level, or the 18,000 feet. The jet stream above our head sets up in October, and that is a unique number of days long, the cycle is. And once it recycles through, that pattern, which is influenced by other things, like the Arctic Oscillation or the polar vortex and your El Nino and La Nina, a bunch of other things as well. It cycles through the year ahead until a new one forms that following October. And I'm showing you proof of this cycling methodology and weather forecasting. I just did in this last video. There are several other examples. We're doing it again here with this major winter storm. Now, we have identified how long this year's Lezak Recurring Cycle is, knowing that or a precise number, which it does oscillate. If it's say like an X amount of day cycle, sometimes it's X minus 2 and an X plus 2 range. So let's just say it was a 50-day cycle. Those systems come back at 48 to 52 days, and it averages around 50. We're starting to get into the weeds here. Let's get out of it. But this storm was anticipated over a month ago using that same methodology. This is back in late November. This is our storm system that's affecting down in Texas and across the southeast and into the east coast right now. We just looked at the last storm. Here it was right there. This was the last storm that came through Kansas and just made an absolute mess. Now, this lifted further north than it did this last storm cycle. While the polar vortex was not in a negative phase, it was not bearing down on North America. Now that it is in December and into January, that has pushed that storm further down to the south. I explained it all in the last video. Go check it out. But here we go. After this, here is our next storm that's coming in. This was it back at the end of October, or excuse me, end of November, coming in off the Pacific Ocean, dropping down towards Colorado. And again, because there's not as much cold air bearing down on the country at this point in time, this storm system did not dig as far south as it did now, which is, again, anticipated. As the jet stream strengthens into winter, most of those storm tracks do begin to dive further south than they did in the fall. But this right here, that is the storm cycle, and as we went into the next day, that pushed off towards the east coast and eventually off. Now, what happened after this? Well, we get this cutoff low that kind of just meanders off of the west coast, eventually coming its way inland as major ridging starts to take place over the west coast, and just kind of a big pool of cool air over the eastern half of the country. Now, using a cycling weather methodology, we should see a pattern that's very similar, if not extremely similar to that, as we are heading into the next cycle. So as we watch what happens next after that storm system pops out, that cutoff low begins to dig down towards Mexico, and we get another storm system that takes shape over the central and southern plains, followed by more Arctic air that dumps down. Now, what are our models showing us at that same 500 millibar level? And let's see if we can zoom in here nicely, and we can. here is that storm system, which again is digging further down to the south because there's more cold air to get that jet stream to strengthen that far south. After this rips on through out of here, we'll have a couple minor clipper systems up to the north. Here's one affecting North Dakota. Just put a video up on that earlier today as well. And we'll see ridging starting to take place off the west coast. We get a cutoff low that meanders off the west coast. It gets sucked back into the main flow, and what do you know? We get another storm system that starts to build down into the central and southern plains, followed by more cold air starting to dump down out of Canada, and it will likely get cold again as the jet stream starts to strengthen off the east coast and more ridging takes place off the Pacific Ocean. Now again, did we not just look at something very, very similar to that? Here's our storm system. It came off the Pacific Ocean. This is that winter storm that's affecting areas of Texas into Virginia, North Carolina right now on the 9th and 10th of January. That comes down, rips on out of here. We have a low off of the Pacific Ocean that gets caught into the main flow, dips down to the south, works its way across the country, and we get more ridging off the Pacific Ocean. Just another example of the LRC at work, and what we can anticipate moving forward is that this whole pattern will cycle through one or two, possibly two more times before we shake winter. As we head into that first couple of weeks of April, we could be looking at a couple of major severe weather outbreaks throughout the central portion and the southeastern portion of the United States. More on that later, but there's your forecast using the LRC right now. Put it in the calendar books, and we'll be waiting for this to happen again at the end of February as this pattern, and into the beginning of March actually, as this pattern begins to cycle back around, and eventually after that into April and May. So we will be back with more of these LRC videos. What are your thoughts on this whole thing? Am I breaking this down simplistically enough, or in a simple enough manner to comprehend, or I shouldn't say comprehend, but to understand what I'm showing you with all these different maps? Let me know down there in the comments what you think. Check out the other videos. Again, the last one's down in the link. There's a couple from last year, and I have a couple from the year before that I plan on showing you examples of coming up here in just a bit. I do appreciate the likes and the follows. They help us out here with stormy weather, and of course those subscriptions. You can find me over on Facebook, meteorologist Justin Storm, if you want to see more daily forecasts for the northern plains specifically, but occasionally diving into the national level. But I try and keep that national stuff and more of these in-depth technical videos for YouTube.